What is going on, everyone? Welcome into the Brant Partial Show. So let's talk Alabama football. So Alabama, it's all the big question mark revolves around who's going to start at quarterback. Is it Jalen Milroe? Is it Buckner, the transfer from Notre Dame? Or is it the other guy? Or is it Ty Simpson, who was a former five-star recruit, has been at Alabama now? It will be a redshirt freshman, redshirted last season. So, yeah, the question marks at quarterback for Alabama. I think Jace McClellan at running back's a guy that will be interesting. How does McClellan perform? I think he has a chance to be the next great superstar back from Alabama. Does he live up to the hype is a big question. The offensive line, they returned two guys, but the two guys are pretty good. Seth McLaughlin at center, and then J.C. Latham at tackle. Latham's considered one of the best tackles in college football and likely be a top or first round pick, and likely has some projection as to be currently, as of now, he's the consensus third or fourth tackle. I talked about him a little bit in my NFL draft rankings, but yeah, he'll be right up there. So J.C. Latham, a really good player. But yeah, I got into I disagreed with a comment one of you guys gave me, and because I did a short talking about Alabama doesn't really have as many true difference makers as they usually do, and the guy disagreed, but I respectfully disagree with him, because he said that Alabama has 4 or 5 star players, which is true. 4 or 5 star recruits usually end up being good players, but there's a difference between good players and true difference makers. You can argue Alabama really, other than Kool-Aid McKinstry at corner and J.C. Latham at offensive tackle, Alabama doesn't really have a lot of true difference makers. And usually to win a national championship, you got to have at least 4 or 5 difference makers. Now, there is a question mark because a guy like Jace McClellan could become a difference maker this year. Maybe one of the young receivers from last year in Isaiah Bond, Kobe Prentice, takes that next step and becomes a superstar. Obviously, you still have Jermaine Burton there. Jermaine Burton is a guy I thought would really break out this past season. And it just didn't really happen for him. He had a really up and down year. Started to really come on as of late, so you hope he can continue that momentum into this year. But yeah, so you like the depth they have at wide receiver. Also got Ja'Cory Brooks, but you're still waiting for that guy to really break out. And they landed the number 1 JUCO wide receiver in Malik Benson. Out of Kansas. So yeah, depth at wide receiver, who's going to really break out and take that next step. On the defensive side of the ball, you got Caleb Downs at safety, likely going to start a true freshman. You got Malachi Moore, the guy that's played a lot of football, but he's one of those guys that, kind of like Burton, there was a lot of expectation early on. Burton obviously started at Georgia, but expectations early on for Malachi Moore, and he never really just took that next step in developing into a great player. Now, could he still be a great player, and could he be like McClellan, and could he build off of the point I was saying where they don't have true difference makers, and he could end up being that difference maker? Maybe. So McClellan and Malachi Moore, 2 question marks as far as can they take that next step and be the true difference makers. But Malachi Moore likely going to step into that star position. They got Kool-Aid McKinstry at corner. Terrion Arnold's a really good corner. Got his chance to play last year as a redshirt freshman. So, yeah, I mean, the secondary appears to be pretty strong. Linebacker remains a question. You lose Henry To'oTo'o. Jalen Moody no longer there. On the defensive line is not as strong as it has been in years past. I like Dallas Turner, but Dallas Turner kind of reminds me of Will Anderson last year. A lot of his sacks just come off of hustle plays where it's such good coverage that he ends up is the first guy to the quarterback. So to me, this is not as strong of a, the front, the defensive line, the linebacker core, not as strong as you really want it to be for Alabama. But they do. I mean, overall, there is good talent on this defense, and I think it is a good enough defense, talent-wise, to win a national championship. But yeah, I mean, as far as difference makers, you're talking about just the defensive side of the ball. You could argue it's really just Kool-Aid McKinstry. But yeah, Alabama going to be a really good team this year, though. Do they have enough key guys to win it all is the main question. So we'll transition to talking about the Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma is interesting because there was high expectations last year. You brought in Dylan Gabriel at quarterback. Dylan Gabriel, I thought, if we flash forward to this time last year, I thought I graded Dylan Gabriel and gave him a top 5 grade. To me, I think he could have had a chance to go, probably not because of the injury, but I think grade-wise, if you're talking pure skill set, in my opinion, I think he would have been probably a top 5 quarterback. Now, is that saying much? Because you saw Hendon Hooker was Hendon Hooker the 5th quarterback go, and you saw him slip to the 3rd round. So Gabriel probably, likely would have been a 3rd, 4th round guy at tops, but was a little banged up. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is you see the talent with Dylan Gabriel, and I think he'll be a guy that's in the discussion as one of the top 5 quarterbacks for the 2024 NFL draft. But you hope for a healthy Dylan Gabriel. You hope this defense overall improves. They have some key guys back. Lost some guys to the transfer portal. David Ogwebu was a linebacker they lost. I thought Ogwebu would become a star player, and he never really became that guy. The movement skills a little bit lacking, even though Ogwebu looked the part, but he's no longer there. But yeah, they got some guys in the secondary. Billy Bowman's a nice player. You see his versatility. He's a guy that can blitz. He's a good tackler. Woody Washington, guy that can play safety or corner. Washington, I like his movement skills. I think he's a nice player. They bring in Reggie Pearson in the transfer portal. Pearson's a guy that did a lot of nice things at Texas Tech, also was at Wisconsin, so he has a lot of experience, and I think he'll help out the Sooners secondary. Number 28, Stutzman, the linebacker, is a pretty good player. They do return some experience on the defensive line, even though the defensive line wasn't strong overall, and they struggled to rush the passer. So, yeah, you got Brent Venables as head coach, who is a defensive-minded guy. So can you take another leap next year defensively? Can you not have collapses like they did in the TCU game and the Texas game? So if you can avoid just having very poor defensive performances, then I think Oklahoma definitely should win more games. Their win total I talked about, so I think it's 9.5. I'd probably take the over. I think Oklahoma's my pick to win the Big 12, just because I believe that Brent Venables is going to turn things around. I think he's too good of a coach not to get the issues on defense fixed. I think this is first year he was kind of implementing his culture, and I think next year you'll start to see the train moving in the right direction. But yeah, Oklahoma, like the TCU-Texas game, those games were pretty much over at the start of the game, because when your defense is having that poor of a performance, it doesn't really matter how good your offense is. You just can't keep up the scoring. You're always just... Then when you get that far behind, then your offense really starts to feel the pressure, and you start to press too much. You saw Gabriel start to try to force some throws down the field, and then that leads to incompletions. You get behind the sticks, and you just fall further and further behind. So yeah, you can't have the collapses like they did against TCU and Texas. But you saw some games like the Oklahoma State game. They came out firing, and you saw what happens when the defense played good enough. They played, passionately, and they got their playmakers involved. I like the receiver number 3, Jalen Farouk, number 3. They land Andrel Anthony in the transfer portal, a guy that really was underwhelming at Michigan, a guy that came in as a 3-star recruit, but he was one of those 3-star recruits where you thought that he was going to be better. It was going to, exceed that billing. And Anthony, even though with the size and the skill set he has, the production was never there. Had some drops, didn't really get as many snaps as you thought, but did flash in the Michigan State game in 2021, really displayed what he could do. But yeah, how Andrel Anthony does with his career really, I won't say on the line, but this is a focal season as far as his future is concerned. Have Drake Stoops there, Bob Stoops' son. Drake Stoops, a nice player, primarily works out the slot, knows how to get open, knows how to catch the ball. It's a tough physical player. I like the running back depth. Marcus Majors, a physical running back. Javante Barnes was a 5-star running back recruit. He's a really nice player. He runs really hard. I think he just needs to another year of improving his vision. But runs a lot like DeMarco Murray. Just wants to get north and south and deliver the boom. And has got good enough burst to really pick up yardage and be super productive. So I think Eric Gray I like the way he ran last year. So can Barnes and Major really set that tone? Because, it seems like Oklahoma still wants to be a run the ball team. It seems like Venables does want to pound the rock. So can they do that next year? And do they have enough? Does this offense? Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the question. Do they have enough playmakers to win the Big 12? I'm going to say yes, just because. Even though I don't think they have a lot of difference makers, I'm going to say yes just because when Dylan Gabriel's on, I think that his accuracy will make up for even if receivers aren't separating as much as they should be. But they returned 2 guys on the offensive line too, and this is an offensive line that played pretty well last year. So I think Oklahoma's in a good position to win the Big 12 next year, and that's going to be my pick to win the Big 12 conference. Transition, we'll talk Penn State Nittany Lions. So with Penn State, what stood out is Drew Singleton, very explosive running back. He's a guy like Drew Aller's going to get this start, most likely at quarterback. Aller's a big guy, can make throws on the run. Also got Katron Allen at running back. Keandre Lambert-Smith at wide receiver. They have experience on the offensive line at tight end. All 5 guys on the offensive line return, and then they return tight end Theo Johnson. Defense, and then also on the offensive line, they have a guy that some considers the best offensive tackle in Olu Fashino. And then when you flip over to the defensive side of the ball, Chop Robinson is getting some hype as a first-round defensive end. Chop Robinson, a little undersized guy, but he's got good speed, can really get off the ball and get around the edge. Do have some experience in the secondary at safety, and then at corner, Kalen King, one of the best corners in the nation. So Penn State returns a lot of guys and just lost 2 games last year. They're going to open up with West Virginia week 1. So Penn State, even though they're probably the consensus 3rd team in the Big 10, they have there's a lot of key things in place for them to win the Big 10. And Ohio State, Michigan, probably Michigan is likely going to be the pick, but like I touched on in one of my shorts the other day, if Penn State, how surprising really would it be for Penn State to win the Big 10? Because I think a lot of times people forget, like, say a team finishes, say a team that has a season like Penn State did last year, where they kind of get embarrassed by Michigan and Ohio State, and they go 11-2. Like 11-2, that's a really good year. I guess the point I'm trying to make is, like, just because you lost the 2 key games that kept you out from winning a conference title, that doesn't mean the next year that you're still gonna be so far behind Michigan, Ohio State. Now, am I ready to say that they would beat Michigan or Ohio State this year? No, I'm not ready to say that, or am I ready to say they've closed the gap? But I am ready to say that this is a new year, and they're going to have a new opportunity. And look at Michigan. Like, if someone were to say that Michigan were to manhandle Ohio State in 2021 after just a couple. I mean, I know they didn't play in 2020, but if you go a couple years back, and you're saying that 2 years from now, with how wide the talent gap everyone's saying between Michigan and Ohio State, if you were to say in 2019 Michigan was going to beat up Ohio State physically in 2021, I think you'd be crazy. Now, if someone were to tell you today that Penn State's going to win the Big 10, I don't think you're crazy, but I think a lot of people would be, a lot of people wouldn't believe it. But you can't write off Penn State. And James Franklin, despite what you think about him, he is a really good recruiter, and he's done a really nice job overall. And yeah, kind of, I was thinking the other day of what a good job he did at Vanderbilt. I don't think he gets enough credit for what he did turning around Vanderbilt. So the next interesting team is the Arkansas Razorbacks. Arkansas, one of the best running backs in the country. They return Rocket Sanders, KJ Jefferson at quarterback. Sam Pittman, their head coach, has done a really nice job of turning Arkansas around. So yeah, Arkansas has a really good all-around team. They did a nice job in the transfer portal getting Isaac Tesla and wide receiver Andrew Armstrong. They really worked the transfer portal hard, and yeah, this has a team 7-6 this past season, 9-4 in 2021. So Sam Pittman done an excellent job of getting Arkansas back to being a very solid winning program. So yeah, with all the guys they have in the transfer portal, experience at quarterback in KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders, he may be the best running back in the country. I haven't really dove too deep in this running back class. I know Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum, the Michigan guys are up there, Henderson, but yeah, Rocket Sanders, an excellent player. So yeah, as far as how Arkansas, they're going to have a tough schedule. Obviously, being in the SEC West, they did get the transfer Trajan Jeffcoat from Missouri. So can this team improve, take another step this year, and build off a really solid 7-6 campaign that ended with a 3-overtime thrilling win over Kansas? So with a tough schedule ahead, Arkansas should be very competitive in the SEC West. Another team I want to talk about is Oregon State Beavers. Oregon State, it seemed like they were kind of headed downhill a few years ago. It seemed like the program was just kind of going to go back to being a really down program, but they bring in Jonathan Smith, a head coach, a guy that attended, former alumni of Oregon State, was the quarterbacks coach under Chris Peterson, was the offensive coordinator at Washington from 2014 to 2017. And he's done a really nice job of bringing in some talent to Oregon State. 10 wins this past season, just the third time in school history. So, yeah, I mean, Oregon State, they do lose some guys to the NFL draft. Nolan, the corner, right. But, yeah, Damian Martinez was the Pac-12 freshman of the year. He's back. And they got some really good depth at running back, too. They got 3 guys that are capable of being really good contributors. So, yeah, they did lose Omar Spates in the transfer portal. But, yeah, I mean, Oregon State, they are a team that no one's going to want to play next year. Really kind of a forgotten about team still, even though they've improved. But, yeah, watch out for the Oregon State Beavers. Smith enters his 6th year with Oregon State. So, Oregon State going to be a tough out this year in the Pac-12. Martinez, Uiagalelei, the quarterback transfer from Clemson, likely going to win the job. So, keep the Oregon State Beavers in mind this year. So let's talk Kansas State. Kansas State was they did a surprise last year. Chris Klieman, kind of like Oregon State, he's done a really nice job of making this program competitive. Kansas State, you thought, was going to kind of fall off, but after Bill Snyder retired. But yeah, they're back. They're still a solid program, and Kansas State a lot like Oregon State. How Oregon State is in the Pac-12. They're a team that no one wants to play. They did lose some NFL guys. Deuce Vaughn, drafted by the Cowboys. They also lost Julius Brents, drafted by the Colts. But Walker Howard back at quarterback. Guy did a nice job. He's a big physical presence at quarterback. They landed Trayshawn Ward, the transfer running back from Florida State. Cooper Beebe, their offensive lineman, is going to be one of the top offensive linemen for the 2024 NFL draft. So yeah, Kansas State will have some. They do have some really good players, and should be tough once again in the Big 12. Some other teams of note I wanted to touch on within this college football pod. We'll talk. I want to talk a little bit of Florida State because, yeah, Florida State. It's I think I speak with a lot of people that they want. It's good for college football to have Florida State good, and Florida State has a lot. They have some good talent. Jaheim Bell at tight end. The quarterback, Jordan Travis, has a lot of experience, but, is this Florida State? It seems like too many times they've been like Texas and they disappointed. Is this like a setting up for a big letdown, or is this the beginning of, Florida State coming back to real prominence and being a dominant program once again, kind of like how they were at times under Jimbo Fisher and then at times under Bobby Bowden. So, yeah, I think like I've touched on before, is this if Florida State really disappoints this year, say they go 5, 6, even 7 wins and they're non-competitive, is this the year where we really question, is like Mike Norvell's probably not on the hot seat, but then I think you really question, is Florida State really, it might be a while, when are they going to be turned around? When are they going to win big and be dominant once again? But so, yeah, pivotal season, I think, for Florida State. There's a lot of hype around the Florida State Seminoles, and, we'll see if they can deliver. But I'm going to wrap with that. Thanks for tuning in to the Brant Partial Show. Make sure to stay tuned for more episodes and clips. Till next time, peace.